Hi, and welcome to another episode from Gut Smokehouse Barbecue. Today I'm in one of my favorite places on planet Earth, standing amongst my 3 smokers on my trailer. Today we're going to cook loin back ribs, also marketed as baby back ribs. So let's get started. The loin back ribs we use are in a cryovac package, and we just get them from BJ's. We use these for catering all the time. So the loin back ribs are different than the spare ribs or the baby back ribs. So what I'm going to do is, on the loin back ribs, we're going to open up the package and we're going to do our best not to cut through the membrane on the back of the ribs, because we do not take off the membrane on the back of the baby back or loin back ribs. And I'll explain to you in a second the reason why we don't do that. So we just pull the ribs out. These are good sized ribs. There's normally about 13 bones in each of the ribs. We'll set this aside, and you'll notice on the back there is the skin. A lot of times people or chefs or pit masters will pull this skin off because the thought is they'll get some penetration of seasoning on the backside. But as I found out over many years of experience, what we do is a little bit different. We'll take the ribs, we'll keep the skin on, and we'll cook them meat side up. And what the skin does is it allows, first of all, there's enough meat on the surface to penetrate the flavors of your rub. But the skin on allows the moisture to not seep through and remain inside the rib, which provides for a very juicy and moist rib. So what we do is very simple. We take Worcestershire sauce, we'll sprinkle a little bit on the back side of the rib, the skin side, and this step probably really isn't necessary. I think we just do it more out of habit than anything. We'll take some of our rub and put a little bit on, not much, just enough to get a little bit of a color on there. Because we cook our ribs skin side down, we don't want to take the chance of the rub burning on the bottom of the rib, so we don't go too much on with the rub, and also with the skin it doesn't really penetrate in at all either. We'll flip them over, push them together, and we'll do the same. We'll take our Worcestershire sauce, get a good dab on there, and we rub the sauce all over the ribs. And then again we come in with a nice layer completely covering our ribs. And it's okay if you go a little bit heavy on this, because what we'll do at the very end is we'll knock off any excess that we put on. So once we get our ribs seasoned up, as we're doing now, we're going to take them and we're going to let them what we call sweat. What do I mean by that? Alright, so these ribs right now, there's a lot of salt in this rub. These ribs right now, as you can see, are very dry. In about 5 minutes, you'll see them get really wet. And what's happening is the salt in the rub is actually starting to pull the moisture out of the rib, which sounds bad, but in reality it's not. Because what happens is that moisture sits on top of the meat, and that moisture then, because of the salt and through osmosis, that moisture gets reabsorbed into the meat, and as it gets reabsorbed, it pulls in the spices that you've put on the meat. So as you can see, the ribs have been sitting out for maybe 2 minutes tops right now, and as you can see, most of the rub has become wet and is sweating now on the ribs. So at this point the moisture is coming out of the ribs, and then in a little while the moisture will be reabsorbed back into the ribs, pulling the spices and seasonings along with it. Okay, so about 4 minutes have gone by, maybe 5, and as you can see the rub has pretty much disappeared, and you can start seeing now the buildup of moisture on top of the ribs. Right where I'm pointing here. And see how wet that is. So at this point the salt is pulling out moisture from the meat, and at this point you're ready to put these ribs on the smoker. And again, I keep these ribs meat side up the entire time so that the membrane on the back can keep the moisture in the ribs and make them succulent and juicy. Alright, let's get these ribs in the smoker. So today we're cooking our ribs on a hog cooker. It's a Meadow Creek PR60. This thing does a great job when it comes to ribs. So the ribs have been on for about 4 or 5 hours at about 225, 250 degrees. So now let's open it up and take a look. We've got a bunch on today. As you can see, the ribs here, now these ribs, none of these ribs at this point have been sauced, spritzed, or anything like that. If you keep these ribs up, you'll notice there's a lot of moisture on these ribs right now. And that's just the natural moisture from the rub and the meat itself. What I'm going to show you is what to look for now when pulling a rack of ribs off the smoker. Loin back ribs have a thicker end and a thinner end. So as in this rack here, you can see this part here is very thick as compared to this thin end. This back rack here, we have the thicker end actually in the front and the thinner end towards the back. So what I'll do is I'll take a pair of tongs. First of all, you look for appearance. As you can see, this rack of ribs, I can bring the camera around there. This rack of ribs, the bones have pulled off nicely. Once you get to that point there, you do basically what is a feel test. So I'm going to take these ribs, I'm going to take my tongs and put them about halfway. When you pick it up, if you see it starting to crack like that, you know it's pretty much done. If it's not cracking and if the ribs pretty much are still firm, which I'm sure I'll have another rack here to show you with, they're not done yet. But these ribs right now are done. Alright, I'm going to show you a rack of ribs that aren't done yet. So, as you can see by the appearance of these ribs, where the bones are, we got a few of them sticking out, but most of them are still pretty much covered. So your first sign is, I don't think they're done. But now we do the feel test. So again, put your tongs about halfway underneath with the thick end towards you, because if the heavier or thicker end is on that end, it's much easier to break and much harder to determine if they're done. So again, squeeze it, you pick it up, and you can see how firm this one is. There's no cracking going on at all, and that means these ribs are not yet done. So we're going to pull that rack off that we said was done. Pull it off from the back, and we're going to set it down here. And as you can see, the color is just a beautiful mahogany cherry color. And what we're going to do is, if we don't act quickly on this rib could dry out very easily. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some of our barbecue sauce and we're going to coat it. Put a nice, very thick coat of barbecue sauce on. And don't forget the ends, the edges, everywhere. We got to cover this completely. Once we do that, this is basically cold barbecue sauce going on a hot rib. So that'll cause it to stick, to congeal a little bit. And that's exactly what we're looking for. We want to put a protective layer between the rib meat and any exposed air as it could dry it out.
Oh, that's nice.
So this is what our rib looks like when it's done. It's got a nice sheen on it. Now what will happen is we'll let that sheen kind of, again, congeal. Once we flip it over and we sauce the back side of the rib, we'll flip it over one more time, give this side one more lather of sauce, and we're all done and ready to eat. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope it was helpful and instructional. And again, this is what we do. This isn't the right way, the best way. This is what we do. This makes our clients very happy. It pleases the profile of our clients. So please, if you get a chance, hit the subscribe button below and join us so we can get 1 billion viewers by next year. Thank you. Alright, so I'll quickly show you the sauce that we use for our ribs for catering. We use our homemade sauce, which there will be an upcoming video on. It's a very cost-effective and very tasty and unique sauce that combines a good flavor of acidity, sweetness, and a little bit of bite to it as well. We combine about half of this with half of the Blues Hog original barbecue sauce. This is a very popular sauce on the barbecue circuit, and it is something that everybody loves. It's got a very unique flavor to it, and it really makes these ribs stand out amongst other ribs.